Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out in the rain. It's a wonderful evening to be here, united by our love of books and by this remarkable community we're so lucky to call home. My name is Elizabeth Hibner, and I am fortunate enough to be the president of the Glenview Public Library Foundation. We're a small but mighty team. A couple of my board members are sitting right here. And the foundation really exists for one simple reason: to make sure our library can do more. More programs, more services, and more moments like tonight. We're a 501c3, which means your donations are tax deductible, and every gift goes directly towards expanding programs at the library. Glenview Reads Together is one of our signature programs that we support. Our library really leads the way when it comes to programming, in breadth, in depth, and in heart. We are truly delighted to support it. Tonight is a perfect example of what is possible when a community invests in its library. If this evening moves you, if you leave here thinking about this wonderful book, A 40-Year Kiss, this conversation, or what this library means to you, I hope you will consider supporting the foundation. Book groups have been meaningful for me for a very long time. The one I belong to has been meeting since 1999, and some of those friends are here with us tonight. There's something really powerful about sitting down together with a book and a really good dessert and sharing some wonderful conversation. It sharpens our minds, it deepens empathy, and it strengthens the bonds between us. And that's what Glenview Reads Together is all about. It is my genuine pleasure to hear from tonight's very special guests. First, our author, Nickolas Butler, whose writing has a way of reaching right into your chest and reminding you what it means to be human. We are so very glad he's here, behind there. And our facilitator, the gifted Heidi Stevens, who I know will guide us into a rich and memorable conversation tonight. Welcome to both of them. They'll be out in a minute. So we hope you all enjoy the conversation, each other, and thank you so very much for being here tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am Linda Sawyer, and I am the Deputy Director of Library Services, and on behalf of myself and our Executive Director, Lindsay Dorfman, who unfortunately could not be here tonight, we want to thank you so much for joining us for this special event featuring Nickolas Butler. We are especially pleased to welcome an author whose work is rooted in Wisconsin, a setting that feels especially resonant for many of us. We are so delighted that his novel, A 40-Year Kiss, has been selected as Glenview Reads Together's 2026 Community Read. We are incredibly grateful to have the support of the Glenview Public Library Foundation for sponsoring this evening's program and for helping make events like this possible for our community. I want to take a moment to thank the Glenview Reads Together committee, our staff team, headed up by Janet McIntyre, Kim Comaford, Carmen Gray, Michael White, and Ethan Fardeau, who could not be here with us tonight. They work very hard to find a book that resonates with the community and that they hope you all will enjoy. So I want to thank you again for being here tonight, for celebrating books and celebrating community. We hope you enjoy what promises to be a wonderful evening. And at this time, I am pleased to turn things over to Michael White, who will introduce our author and this evening's moderator.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Linda. So yep, I'm Michael White. I am a programming librarian at the library, and on behalf of the Glenview Reads Together team, I've got a little bit of housekeeping for us all, okay? So this is really incredibly meaningful work for us. We are able to select a book, share that book with you, we all read it, and then we're able to be here tonight in the same room and listen to the author and Heidi talk about it. It's pretty incredible for us, so thank you all for being here. I want to thank the foundation, the Glenview Library Foundation, for their continued and generous support of Glenview Reads Together. We want to thank the Park District for the use of the Lakeview Room space tonight. And thanks to our friends at the bookstall for being here. They're in the back of the room with copies of Nick's books for sale. He'll sign them for you later. If you're planning to get a book signed, you'll get a number when you purchase the book. Please line up in numerical order so we can move things along smoothly, and have your books ready when you reach the front of the line. We will save some time tonight for some questions and answers. At the end of the conversation, I'm going to ask patrons who have questions for Nickolas to come up to this podium and ask him right there, and we'll move things along that way. Now I'd love to introduce our two guests tonight. Nickolas Butler was raised in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Iowa Writers' Workshop. His debut novel, Shotgun Love Songs, was an international success, translated into 10 languages, and is currently in development for a film. He's the author of a short story collection, Beneath the Bonfire, and 4 previously acclaimed novels, including The Hearts of Men, which was shortlisted for a major French literary award, and Godspeed, longlisted for the Reading the West Book Award. Nickolas lives in rural Wisconsin with his wife and 2 children on 16 acres of land next to a buffalo farm. Heidi Stevens is the Director of External Affairs at the University of Chicago's TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health. Before joining the University of Chicago, Heidi worked at the Chicago Tribune for 23 years as a writer and editor. For the past decade, she has written a daily column called The Balancing Act that is now a nationally syndicated column. And it is an amazing Facebook community group that if you are not a part of, I encourage you because it warms my heart almost every single day. So without further ado, on behalf of the Glenview Library Foundation, on behalf of the Glenview Library, please join me in a big warm welcome for Nickolas Butler and Heidi Stevens. I knew I'd forget something. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you. We talked about that beforehand. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those lovely introductions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This is going to be fun. I have 2 pages of questions, so we're going to dive right in because I think we want to let everybody out of here by 8. Is anyone on like a real tight schedule? If we go to like 8:03, are we good? All right. 8:30's okay. 8:30's okay? Okay, here we go. Okay, let's start where you started, which is sitting at a bar and overhearing a conversation between a couple who maybe hadn't seen each other in a while. He says, I still dream about you, I'm still in love with you, and you're eavesdropping, and then what?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I don't take anything for granted in my publishing career, and I can't keep going without readers like yourself, so thank you very much for being here. It's kind of a cold, drizzly night. You could have just stayed home and read a book in bed, but you chose to be here, and I appreciate it. Yeah, like 3 years ago, I was in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin at one of my favorite Wisconsin bars called the Tomahawk Room. I was minding my own business, working a Sudoku puzzle, killing some time. And there were two people that were kind of seated like maybe a little bit further away from me than where you are. And I wasn't really paying them any attention initially. And then I heard the man say this, like, I still dream about you. I dream about kissing you. May I kiss you? And I just started blushing. Because I love the Tomahawk Room. It's a very special bar to me, but I can assure you that that sort of like romance doesn't happen all the time at the bar. I also got my cell phone out and started taking notes because I felt like something kind of magical was going to happen. And I didn't know what to expect of the kiss, but I guess I just thought it was going to be like a polite peck. But it wasn't. It was really, really passionate. And it went on for a while, and I kept blushing and blushing. And then the conversation went on for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and it seemed to me like what I was witnessing was that these two people had been high school sweethearts or college sweethearts, or maybe they'd been married in their early 20s, and this guy was just putting all his cards on the table, and he really desperately wanted to reunite with this woman. Eventually they left the bar, and I just was sort of left sitting there thinking like, well, shoot. Like, I had kind of planned on writing a literary thriller. That's what my publisher was expecting me to write. But I feel like when the cosmos puts you at the bar and you hear that conversation, you can't just write a thriller. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. So, yeah.
So did you know right away, I'm going to write this, or did you leave and you kind of kept thinking about them over the next few days, or was it like right away?
No, I knew right away. I think there were a couple things at play in that moment. One, the man was borderline desperate, which I don't really think of desperation as a particularly sexy characteristic, but he was desperate, and I kept thinking, well, where's that coming from? Like, that must be coming from a place. And it just seemed to me like in that moment I knew who these people were. I didn't know who they were at all, but I know Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin pretty well. I know small town Wisconsin well. And I like really identified with them in that moment. And I knew that it was kind of a risky thing for my publishing career because I knew that my editor was not going to be, she just wasn't expecting this. That's not her fault. It's no, I don't know, I'm not judging her, but I knew that she was going to be surprised by this, but I just felt like you have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's an element of that in several of your books where you turn an anecdote or a conversation into an entire book, right? Yeah. Godspeed, the book that I wrote before that, kind of came about from this weird conversation. In 2013, my wife and I decided to move back to our hometown of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And we commenced building a house, which is to say, not that I was picking up a hammer and building the house, but that we, contracted with builders. And when the house was done, a family friend of ours who works in the construction industry came over to, give it his seal of approval or something. And he started talking about a multi-million-dollar house that he was working on south of Eau Claire, which is pretty unusual. And he said that at some point towards the end of the construction, the homeowner got everybody together, all the guys that were working on the house. And she said that she would offer each of them a $15,000 bonus if they got the house finished in the next 3 weeks. And my friend turned to me and he said, Nick, if we had all the meth in the world, we couldn't have finished that house in 3 weeks. And I thought, holy that seems like a good idea for a novel, because who is this homeowner who needs the house done so quickly? Where is her money coming from? She clearly has no regard for the people that are working on her house. Why did she need it done so quickly? And also, and maybe most interesting, my friend had actually considered her offer, and in considering it, he thought the only way to get it done was to use crystal meth to stay up all night long to meet their deadline, which also seemed like a compelling sort of beginning for a novel. Boom. Yeah, there's your novel. Yeah. So in 40 Year Kiss, you approach it from both Vivian's point of view and Charlie's point of view. So as a reader, you're seeing both of their perspectives, which I know is an approach that you use in other books too. in this book, I liked it so much because it really complicated my rooting interests, I guess. I wasn't like automatically Team Vivian or automatically Team Charlie or automatically even them getting back together. But I wonder if you could talk about your decision to write it that way.
I don't think I ever even considered writing it any other way. The wonderful thing about writing from multiple points of view like that is that, especially for this book, I could withhold information. I could withhold the information that explained potentially why they didn't succeed early on. And it also created a kind of rhythm in the book. Like, I don't know that I'm necessarily trying to write like a page turner, though I think, why wouldn't I be? I don't know, maybe, no, I am trying to write a page turner. I want you as the reader to be turning pages as quickly as possible, and I hope that leads to you reading more of my books. And I think that withholding information and stopping scenes at certain points builds a kind of rhythm, and then you want to follow that rhythm as a reader. Yeah.
Did you know where the story was going did you sit down knowing where the story was going, or did you figure out where it was going as you were writing?
I didn't always know where it was going, though I think I always knew where it was ending. I oftentimes know how a book is beginning and where it's going to go, but the mystery for me is sort of in the middle there. And I think one thing that I've found, I was talking to some of the librarians before we came on, I really, I don't like AI at all. Anthropic stole many of my titles to feed into some sort of algorithm to teach AI how to write fiction so that I don't have a job at some point. But the thing that gives me hope about humans writing fiction is that without fail, every time that I start a book and I know where the beginning is and I know where the ending is, surprises happen in between. And sometimes the weirder the surprise, the more I feel like AI is never going to be able to duplicate that.
Yeah.
And there were moments in this book, like there's a scene where Charlie, I think, maybe it's like 2/3 of the way through the book, they're not doing so well.
Yeah.
And he goes outside and he's got his cell phone. He lives out in the country and he plays the sound of a distressed rabbit to see like what sort of predator will come. Well, that I did that one time on our land. I live out in the country and I'm into birds and into monitoring what wildlife comes over our land. So one day I'm just standing in a field after dinner. I'd probably had a couple drinks and this seemed like a good idea. I'm standing there holding the phone and I played this call for like 2 seconds and an owl swooped so close to my hand that I thought it was going to steal the phone.
Wow.
And that's the sort of thing where like, screw you AI, but like that's never going to happen to you, you know?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you have to go out into the universe and encounter it, and then I put a certain amount of those experiences into my novels.
Yeah, serendipity is
Yeah.
AI is not capable of that.
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too. One of the scenes that felt really pivotal to me was when Vivian told Charlie that they have a daughter together, and Jessie. And Charlie isn't angry. And I think that an earlier version of Charlie might have been angry, maybe justifiably angry even. But that to me felt like we're watching a new version of Charlie come out. And so I wondered if he was not angry because he had softened, or was he not angry because he was carrying around so much guilt that he didn't even trust his own instincts anymore about what he should be angry about or not?
I think for me, I think that's probably the scene that readers ask about the most, which I take to mean that there's perhaps an amount of disbelief or curiosity about the decision making that's happening there. But to me, Vivian couldn't. Part of the reason why they didn't make it is that he wasn't mature enough to be a dad.
Yeah.
And she knew that.
Yeah.
And she was right to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this moment, she's kind of testing him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he is angry, but I think he's learned to deal with his anger, and I think he's matured, and I think he realizes that there are moments in life that are tests like that. Like if all he does is cave to his own selfish emotions, he's going to lose out on this opportunity to become a dad,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to lose out on Vivian. And so actually in the book, it's described as like he's silent for miles
Yeah.
as they're driving.
Yeah.
And if I could do something different with the book, I would have probably stretched out that silence on the page even longer,
Mm-hmm.
and just like lived in that kind of awkward silence. But I think it does the work fine. But I think it's a lot of different things happening there. But I think it's maturity. There's nothing wrong with being angry. It's just like what you decide to do with your anger, and who do you focus it on, or
Yeah. Jessie is so wonderful and such a source of joy for the reader, for her parents. What made you decide to have her be born with Down syndrome?
Well, I hadn't really planned it from the beginning. I mean, the moment after those people left the bar, I couldn't have known about this particular character, but I started to think about the reasons why, what would keep Vivian in place in Chippewa Falls. Because one of the things that was important to me about the night where I heard that conversation was that the man seemed like he was not from Chippewa Falls. It doesn't, I don't know if I think it does make it into the book, but he talks about clothes shopping in the Twin Cities. I can just tell you that your average Chippewa Falls resident coming to the Tomahawk Room does not talk about buying new clothes at the in the Twin Cities. And she seemed more local to me, so I just spent days or weeks thinking about those two people, and it seemed to me like maybe something had kept her in place.
Yeah.
And it seems psychologically realistic that, especially in the early 80s, although I think it happens plenty now, a man would leave a woman with certain domestic responsibilities, and that would sort of keep her in place.
Rooted, yeah.
And so even, there's complications with Jessie and where she grows up, but that was part of it, like rooting Vivian in place. Also, I just didn't think if Jessie didn't have Down syndrome, I thought there was a chance that Vivian could have invited him into her life sooner.
Yeah.
But the fact that this person needs more steadiness out of a parent would prevent Vivian from trusting him until the moment when she could.
What was your research like to flesh out Jessie? Because it never tips into, stigma or cliche.
Yeah.
That had to be difficult.
Well, so when I was growing up in Eau Claire, there was my neighbor across the street had Down syndrome, and she liked to dance, and she had a window. It wasn't her bedroom. This isn't a creepy story. She had a window. I presume it must have been like an office window, and she would be in the office listening to music and dancing, and I just thought that was really wonderful. It's like a memory of my childhood that's still there.
Yeah.
So I think that was always in the background, and I just wrote her character the way that I knew what I knew about that neighbor. And then after I got done writing the novel, I have family friends who have adopted two men with Down syndrome, and they are much more profoundly affected by Down syndrome than Jessie. But I had them read the novel, which is really I don't know, it might be the first time I've ever really had like a beta reader, but it was important to me in this case. And they just said that, people with Down syndrome have just a spectrum of opportunity. Some people can have jobs, can travel, lead pretty normal lives, and some people are profoundly, you know, I don't know if handicap's the right word, but that's the word I'll use. They're profoundly affected by it. And Jesse is, I would say, more high functioning. And they read it and didn't have any problem with the book, so I thought, all right, okay. Yeah.
I love that. Was Melissa inspired by anybody in your life?
Was Melissa? I mean, I think one of the things that's happening in this book is a character in the book is alcoholism, really. And part of that is because, you know, I live in a state where 10 of the drunkest counties in America are Wisconsin. You know, I got the idea for a book in a bar. You know, I'm not proud to tell people this, but I'm just really honest with my process in my life. So, you know, like during COVID, we have 2 kids that were home, you know, every day. And my wife was working from home, so she wasn't really their teacher, it was me. And my kids didn't, I don't know what your experience with that was, but like my kids did not want to learn from me. I have taught at the college level. I designed cool classes for them during COVID, like an ornithology class. You've heard that we live on 16 acres in rural Wisconsin. I'd wake them up at the crack of dawn and we'd go sit somewhere and listen to the birds. They hated it, you know. I have a huge record collection, so I'd have music appreciation days and a music appreciation class. I'd put on like Miles Davis's Kind of Blue or John Coltrane's My Favorite Things, or they hated that. All just to say, when like 4 o'clock rolled around, I was pouring myself a big old glass of wine.
Yeah.
And then
4 sounds late.
Yeah. And then like 2 weeks later, I noticed that my wine consumption was even more. And then a month more, you know, it just kept increasing. And there was a moment where I was like, this is getting away from me. And my dad had been a bad alcoholic, like very, very bad. Like waking up in the morning and having brandy in your coffee, kind of bad. So I knew what it looked like, and I knew how it could derail a marriage, you know, and how it can derail the connection between parent and child too. So I think part of Melissa's me, you know.
Is it hard to write characters that you care about and probably on some level even fall in love with a little bit, and then have them do dumb, weak, painful things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the harder thing for me, the longer that I go in my publishing career, is like I've been working on a new book, for over 3 years now. And I'm probably like 85% of the way done with the book. And I'll just be laying in bed thinking about the book, and I deeply internalize the notion that these are imaginary people in my mind that I've been talking to for 3.5 years. And at some point I need to like hand this manuscript, which is just ink on paper, to someone, and I wonder, am I crazy? Like, I care so much about these people. They're all I think about. You know, I care so much about them that actually there's times where I could kill them or injure them, and maybe that would be the right thing for the novel, and I can't. You know? So it's like less about, it's become like about my mental health, I think, you know? I just don't, my wife works for a wealth management firm. And I have I just had conversations with her coworkers at this like partners dinner, and I'm like, I don't know that my brain works the way that your brain works.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You know, I don't know how I'm supposed to explain that.
But that's a good thing. Yeah, nothing against wealth managers, but
I mean,
it's a different.
Yeah.
Your brains are wired different, right?
Yeah. But I just worry that I just worry that most of the population would think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but that's the beauty of writing and reading, and I feel that way when I finish a book. I miss these people. I'm so sad. I mean, I loved the experience, But I turn that last page and I'm sad, like, oh, I don't get to hang out
Yeah.
with them now.
Yeah.
I think it's genuine sadness. I don't think it's
Yeah.
imagined.
Well, I mean, one thing that I think is interesting in a conversation about fiction, and maybe the librarians in the room can attest to this. I mean, even if you look around this room, there's very few men in the room. And men, I think the librarians will vouch for me here, men typically don't read as much fiction as women. And I think that's because there's something in the male psyche that needs to know that what they're reading is like somehow useful. I think there's another part of the male psyche that would potentially feel real feelings for imaginary characters in fiction and be like, what am I feeling? And I've never been that way. Like, I grew up with a mom who filled our house with books and novels, and writers were always my heroes, and I loved being lost in a world. I never thought about it in terms of usefulness, like how am I using my time?
Yeah.
It was like a beautiful escape for me.
Yeah, I love that. Another really pivotal scene, I think, for me as a reader was Charlie in the hotel room, or not the hotel room, the hotel, helping the drunk guy get back to his room and his family safely. And that was like, okay, this is a new Charlie, like he is healed. And I wonder if you think that Charlie would have arrived at this better healed version of himself without Vivian.
No, I don't think so. No. I mean, I think he provides, for these characters, she provides a second chance for him and something to shoot for. And I think, in my own marriage, I'm very grateful to my wife for, I think, also fulfilling something like that. Like, I can't be my worst person and be married to her. I don't want to be my worst person, When I was in grad school at the University of Iowa, it was 2 years where I was away from my wife and son quite a bit. We were living north of the Twin Cities, and every Monday I would commute down to Iowa City, and every Thursday or Friday I'd go back to the Twin Cities. And, living by myself for 4 or 5 days of the week, I was just like a barbarian. I was like a teenage college version of myself, eating the worst shitty food and too much beer, and it was awful, And then I would come home and feel like healthy, like, oh, you have something to, you should eat healthy for these other people who need you and want you to be, around. Yeah.
I think that Charlie helps Vivian become a more healed, whole version of herself too. And I think that when she's not upset with Melissa about the abortion, that feels like a different Vivian than the one who gets out of the car after Christmas shopping. So do you think that Charlie brings something to her life too?
I definitely do. I think there's, I think Vivian has a little bit of a martyr complex.
Yeah, I agree.
Which I think in my own life I see represented more in women than in men. And I think Charlie calls her on that sometimes, and sometimes she responds negatively, and sometimes she responds more positively. But I think part of her story is that she's always taken care of people, which is psychologically realistic in this country. Women take care of, like, right now, if you're my age, you have paid tens of thousands of dollars in childcare. And if you haven't done that, it's because there's a grandparent in your life who's probably taking care of your children. And oftentimes that grandparent is probably a grandma, right? Women are, not just saying this, women hold us together. And I think he's representing, like, hey, you don't always have to hold everything together.
Yeah.
Like, we only have so much time. You can think about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that that would have occurred to her
No,
without him, right?
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's romantic and sort of frivolous.
Yeah,
You know,
and he's
but that's-
rich.
And
That
he's
helps.
rich. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Ask your wealth
yeah.
management friends. That
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. It doesn't hurt, no. But you can still be romantic and have no money, you know. You
Oh.
could still have fun and have no money.
I don't mean that it helps a love story. I mean it can. But I mean it helps your ability to go through life being a little frivolous.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah,
I
and
understand.
assume that things will be
Yeah.
taken care of because you can pay for them to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I like about their romance is that some things do require his money, but there are moments where she does things romantically that cost no money. And I like that very much.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, it's definitely a Wisconsin story, but there's some Chicago in it. And it's so realistic. So the energy at Wrigley, the riding on the L, the cop who says, like, I'll just take you there when they ask, you know, where someplace is. Like, is that based on your lived experience in Chicago? Did you research that? How did that work?
I went to school for a year. I was terrible in high school. I graduated in the 49th percentile of my high school class, which my kids now are like, how did you even do that? Like, but I was fortunate. I had a grandpa who had some money, so I went to DePaul University in my first year, and my grandpa paid for me to go there. And I was pretty lonely when I was at DePaul, but I loved the city. And my favorite thing to do, because it cost me no money, was you would get a free public transit card. So I would
As a student?
As a student.
Okay.
So I would just ride the train around. I'd go to the art museum when it was free.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to Wrigley Stadium, Wrigley Field, even if like nobody was playing, just to sort of be outside.
Yeah.
When I had money, I would go to Cubs games,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved it. I think one thing for me, as somebody who grew up in the 80s, I realize now that WGN and WGN's baseball was sort of my babysitter. Because in the summertime, my parents weren't there. Like, we didn't have a babysitter. So it was just Harry Carey and Steve Stone for 3.5 hours were like my babysitters, you know? And the Cubs at that time were full of characters that I like still, you know, like Andre Dawson and Ryan Sandberg and all these people. And like, so, and movies, and you all know this as being Chicago folks, but like movies in the 1980s, there was a healthy amount of Chicago in film. And these were, you know, that was also a time where if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to go to the, you know, movie rental store and check something out, and then, or maybe you bought a copy and then you watched it 300 times, as I've done with Ferris Bueller's Day
Okay.
Off.
Yeah, I had a
which,
feeling
you
this was
know,
going to Ferris Bueller.
you know,
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, like, I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and my dad would have business conferences in Chicago. So we would come down for the National Hardware Show.
Okay.
You know, we'd stay at some classic old hotel off Michigan Avenue, and it was always like Chicago was a happy place for me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, these characters from small town Wisconsin, like, I want them to have kind of a big city experience. And I want the city also to embrace them,
Yeah.
you know, and be kind to them. Because I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
You know, there's been times where I was lost in a big city and I didn't know who to ask. So, you know, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, cops are good people. So I would just walk up to a cop and be like, I'm totally lost. Where should I go? And there were times where the cops would be like, follow me.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite human emotion to explore in your writing?
Regret. I love regret. Because I don't know how, because I feel like there's so much in our culture right now that doesn't embrace regret. Like people say, I don't regret anything, or you only live once. all these things which to me seem like borderline nihilistic. Like, I am one of those people who, if I forget your name, then I will wake up one morning 5 years from now and be like, God,
Yeah.
how did I forget that person's name? You know, which is like a minor human grievance.
Right.
But then
Right.
if I've done something seriously wrong, I can't, you know, I feel awful about it and I try to do something different. And I think that's the utility of regret, learning something. I also feel like people that experience regret on that level, it's a sort of emotional journey that can last for decades, right? You've harmed somebody in some way and it can just haunt you
Yeah.
like a ghost.
But I think you also believe in second chances.
I do, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So that's sort of the other side of the coin of exploring regret, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel like people make mistakes. I mean, they just do. That's part of being a human. So, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about writing fiction is that you can allow somebody to sort of try to fix something the way that Charlie is, you know. I guess that, I'll tell you this story. One of my closest childhood friends is a guy named Nick Gulig. He was former poet laureate for the state of Wisconsin. He attended the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. He graduated 1 year before I got there, which was a very good thing because if we'd been there at the same time, no writing would have gone on at all. We just would have been at the bar all the time. In Nick's hometown not hometown, but in Nick's town now of Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, which is in the southern part of our state, the public library invited me to talk about this book. And they asked Nick to moderate it. And now Nick is like a really fancy language poet. So I thought, well, what's he gonna think of this novel, which could be marketed as a romance? It's got this beautiful cover. Like, is he gonna take the book seriously? And I was worried, especially because I love him, that he wouldn't like it or he wouldn't approve of it in some way. He read the book more carefully than anyone that I've ever talked to. And he said, do you think you wrote the character of Charlie as a way of redeeming your dad, who was an alcoholic, who cheated on your mom relentlessly, who made your childhood, you know, full of alcohol and drugs and stuff like that? And I never thought about that. But I love that reading, that like in the back of my mind, my dad, who's not with me anymore, like I can give him a chance on the page.
Yeah.
And like, what if somebody had said that to my dad? Like, this doesn't have to be your path.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a bad man. You could try harder. You could quit drinking, you know.
Yeah. Is that the answer you gave?
I was like so stunned when he presented that reading that I think I wanted to cry because it meant
Yeah.
so much to me that he had read it that way. And
Yeah.
my dad loved him, you know, like Gulig was a stoner back in high school and I think they would smoke weed together on the side, which he probably loved in my dad, but I was appalled that my
Sure.
dad would be doing that, you
Yeah.
know? So he knew him really well and it just like hit me like a stone in the forehead, you know, I didn't
Yeah.
really know what to do with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
More than a decade before 40-Year Kiss, you wrote Shotgun Love Songs, which is for sale back there, a great book. If anyone's looking for another book to read after 40-Year Kiss. I wonder how your experience in a marriage changed how you wrote about marriage from Shotgun Love Songs to 40-Year Kiss. They're both of them have a marriage at the center. You were a different husband when you wrote the first one.
That's, wow, that's a good,
You sure you're not a therapist?
oh my gosh. I think part of the process of writing Shotgun Love Songs was I started when I was 29 or 30 years old. And at that time, there was like a wave of friends or relatives who were getting married. I don't know, maybe you've been at, you know, a point in your life where it just feels like you look at your summer calendar and you're like, wedding.
Yeah, for sure.
And there were also some of the first divorces that were happening at that same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm actually working on a follow-up to Shotgun Love Songs right now. So I'm writing that marriage, but 15 years later.
Henry and Beth?
Yeah. And what I think about what I'm thinking about in the book right now is the ways that we carry secrets or burdens, and we sometimes can't convey that to the people that are closest to us.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, in West Central Wisconsin, we have one of the highest rates of male suicide because there's so many farmers that are going out of business. It's just awful.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in a very agricultural part of Wisconsin, so I've watched many farms on the street that I live in go out of business. And I've just been thinking about like the psychic weight of, wanting to continue your family farm and having it fail and feeling like a failure and being inside a marriage, and like how do you tell somebody that you feel like a failure?
Yeah.
And they can't fix you,
Yeah.
Yeah. They might love you, like Nick Gulig, he would love that I'd mentioned his name 3 times in this talk, but
He can watch the recording.
yeah.
Yeah.
He told me one time that the human condition is the fact that we can never quite know each other.
Mm.
We can try,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know what you think of me right now.
Mhm.
I'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have to go through this life together and interact with one another.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're talking a little bit about your childhood throughout this conversation, and I read in an interview that you gave probably a few years ago that as a 5th grader, you wrote a 110-page story about like 1800s migration across Western America.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
that true?
Yeah, so one thing that I love talking about is that I had the best education growing up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I went through the public schools, and I wouldn't be sitting here without my public school teachers. It's super easy for me to say that. Like, I believe in gratitude, and this was a time before No Child Left Behind, before rampant testing, when I think public education trusted teachers to like work with kids and do their own thing. And I had this 5th grade teacher named Doug Smith, who was like, he seemed old when I had him.
Yeah.
He was like a second grandpa to me. He had played professional baseball.
Oh, cool.
And he was kind of like, if you remember the movie Field of Dreams, he was kind of like Archibald Moonlight Graham. I became friends with him later again in my life. And he told me that the origin story of his marriage was that, it's like kind of sexy too. But he was playing a baseball game and his wife was in the stands and she was like waving at him and like trying to get his attention. And so he asked her for a date after the game. But she was from Eau Claire. She was like a townie and she didn't want to leave Eau Claire. And so even though he could have made it to the major leagues, he just stopped progressing in minor league baseball and stayed in Eau Claire to be with his wife, who he loved, and they were married for more than 50 years. Anyway, during the 5th grade, he would read to us for 45 minutes a day. And he wouldn't read like kids' books.
Wow.
He'd read The Old Man and the Sea. He'd read Ivanhoe. Like, he trusted us to just figure out these big books. There was no YA literature at that time. He just read us beautiful books, and he would figure it out. And we did.
Wow.
And one of the projects he gave us is like, well, we're going to study the westward migration across America in the 1860s. So you've got all year to work on a project. You can fill it with maps, drawings. If you want to make it creative nonfiction, great. If you want to make it fiction, great. You've got an hour every day. And like, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I just went crazy. I wrote 125 pages, and when I wasn't quite finished in May, towards the end of the year, my mom was like, guess what? The only way you finish a book is if you just sit down and write it, which is the only writing advice there is.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to sit down and write it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Stop watering your plants. Just write the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last question, because I know we want to have some time for audience questions. But after hearing that story, do you think that writer is a vocation, or do you think that it's a calling or a personality?
I think it's definitely it is my job, but I think it's a passion, which could be like a calling. One thing that I find strange is that people, sometimes at parties, people have too much to drink and they'll ask me how much money I make in a year. And I always think like, well, I wouldn't ask you that question, but I think it's like, and nor would you ask a nun or a priest what they made in a year. You would understand that is that's what they feel like they're on this planet for.
Mm-hmm.
Last year I made less money than your average person working part-time at a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many days where I just stare at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think I'm doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I'm ready, I can write these books. And guess what? There's been years where I've made more than a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But I also need the time to kind of be weird and think
Yeah.
on that deep level, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's both things. I mean, you do have to treat certain aspects of it like a job, you know? I mean, I can't show up at this reading drunk or an hour late. I mean, I want you to continue reading my books. I hope that you leave this and think, well, he was an interesting guy. He seemed authentic,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's part of my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people will. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to invite you to come up and ask your questions of Nickolas. I'm going to ask you to come up to the podium.
Brave souls. There's going to be a line.
What is one of your favorite things in the whole world to do? Not a person, but a thing. And do you ever bring that into your stories?
Yeah, I'll tell you one of my favorite, this time of year in Wisconsin, one of my favorite things to do is to look for morel mushrooms and wild asparagus. And the opening scene of the new book that I'm working on is two friends walking along country roads in rural Wisconsin looking for morels and getting wild asparagus out of the ditch. I think it's like, for me, another way that I'll answer your question is, do you remember, like, I think it was about 2 years ago, Jeff Bezos had this big gaudy wedding in Venice. It was all over the news. And I thought, what a shit show that wedding must be, right? Like, all these people traveling halfway across the world, nobody in Venice wants them there, right? They probably don't like each other. They're probably all talking about what a gaudy, stupid wedding it was. And one night I went out on my land and it was berry season. The berries were like perfectly ripe. And I went out with my dog and I just collected ice cream container after ice cream container of berries, and I was feeding the dog berries and I was eating berries, and I was like, Jeff Bezos will never know the pleasure of eating perfectly ripe, beautiful berries off his own land, nor would he know what it's like to collect armloads of free asparagus from the ditch. And I am a richer person because of these experiences. Yes, you are. Yeah.
First, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has
Thank
been
you
such
for
a fun
coming.
conversation. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit about your choice to not use quotation marks in the book. And
Yeah.
I'll admit that when
two people have left the line behind you now.
I'll admit the first few pages or maybe even chapters, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know about this choice. This
Yes.
is going to be kind of confusing.
Yeah.
But then it actually really grew on me and like the atmosphere that I thought it created. But I'd love to hear more about your motivations and that choice.
Thank you very much for your question. I rarely receive hate mail for my writing, but I did receive a bit of hate mail about a year ago from somebody who identified themselves as a college educator who accused me of trying to kill the English language, couldn't figure out what I had studied at the University of Iowa. How did I not know what a quotation mark was? All this stuff. And so I read it and I was like, oh, I started typing up one draft, like a mean sort of reply, and then it kept getting politer and more polite, and then eventually but anyway, I talk about her anytime I get a chance. When I knew that I was gonna write this book, I was worried that it could just be marketed as like just a romance. And there's nothing wrong with romances. Right now, any bookseller in America will tell you romances are keeping the publishing industry alive. And one thing that I've learned as somebody who just published something that's basically a romance is that romance readers talk to each other. They buy a lot of books. So don't mishear me. I'm not disparaging that genre. But I wanted it to also have a literary feel. I wanted the prose to have a certain rhythm, which in my mind is a little bit like listening to Sam Shepard read his work. His voice was always in the back of my mind. And on the page, I wanted it to look very austere. And I was also thinking about books that I thought this could be sort of like in conversation with. And one of those books was Our Souls at Night by Kent Haruf. Has anybody read that book? Good. For those of you who haven't, fix the problem. It's a fantastic book. You can write me a thank you note later. You will not be disappointed. And Kent Haruf never used quotation marks. Neither did Cormac McCarthy. It's not like a new thing necessarily. It's just, I wanted it to look a certain way on the page. And I wanted it to be very like austere. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, that kind of was my question.
Okay.
Because no other book that has my book club argued and fought more vehemently than over your book.
Oh.
Which actually was a good thing, because I think we talked more than we drank
Okay.
at that point in time. But and there was arguments all over the place about Vivian took him back too easily, and that was just because she was like just so tired and so broken, and he never would have come back if he wasn't rich, because his ego wouldn't have let him, and he would have never gone out into the wilderness to do that predator thing if he had ever heard the screech of a fisher cat, because in our little town in Massachusetts we have fisher cats. But the one that we argued most about was the quotations.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a problem with that. That was the only thing that I didn't have a dog in that fight of that argument, because
Okay.
I listened to the book on audiobook.
Okay.
And I always feel a little guilty when I listen to audiobooks, because I worry that I don't know what the economics are, and I worry that that's not as good for the author. So I was just curious, like, can I stop being worried about listening to audiobooks? Because I really do get to experience so many more books because I'm walking the dog while I'm listening to an
You
audiobook.
should feel deeply guilty by each of my titles, which are conveniently stocked in the back. No, look, I don't think you should feel bad at all about listening to an audiobook at all. I think more people, if anything is bringing people to reading, it could be audiobooks right now, and so that's fine. My hope would be that you liked it enough that you'll find another one of my books, and whether you listen to it on audiobook or buy it, like, that's good for me. So, no, I wouldn't feel guilt. No, don't feel guilty about that.
Hello, welcome to Glenview.
Thanks.
We had a very lively book club discussion after reading the book. We really enjoyed it. And I want to thank you for a happy ending,
Oh.
because I was really expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. I just was very happy with that.
Good.
Were you ever compelled to try to find the couple again, or did you?
Oh, man. Yeah, great question.
Worried they'd want royalties?
So here's so the question was, did I ever feel compelled to find the couple? Which is a great question, and I get it fairly frequently, and I'm happy to answer it. So here's the thing. I know the day that I was at the bar. I know the time I was at the bar. I know the bartender who was working that night. I know the owner of the bar. Before the book officially released, we had a book signing there at the bar. And all the bartenders came. They've all read the book. We cannot figure out who those people were. So what I think is that I had a very romantic notion of what they were doing at the bar, but I think they might have been having an affair, and they don't want to be found. Because, you know, the book got pretty good press in my part of the world. Like, it's done pretty well. People know about it. Certainly everyone who works at that bar knows about it. And we have no idea who those people were. And it's interesting because I actually, after the book got sold, some extremely powerful Hollywood people were kind of kicking the tires to see if it would get, you know, whether it would be a right fit for a movie. So I actually made an appointment with the owner of the bar, and I said, hey, like right now in the book, it's called The Tomahawk Room. But if it gets turned into a movie, or if the book does really well, like people could be coming to your bar, and I don't want them to ruin the atmosphere of the bar, you know. So do you want me to keep the name in there? And he was like, we could use the business. So I just, you know, I left it in there. But we've never been able to figure out who that couple is, and I suspect they don't want to be found.
Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for coming tonight. I just had a question. When I was researching you as an author, finding out some of your other works, I noticed you tried running for public office. And my personal feeling is that these are, when people are voting, they're making an emotional decision more so than a logical one. And what do you think is failing as far as when people of good intentions, you know, acting in good faith, are trying to, you know, change our society in a positive way, but somehow they get the narrative wrong when they're running for office? And I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Wow.
Do you think I got the narrative wrong?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, in general, I feel like you as an author would understand storytelling in a better way, and whereas I feel like people are connecting with a lot of negative emotions.
I see.
Of some of our worst instincts.
Yeah.
And when I see people, and I'm like, these are really great ideas, but they're not connecting like as a storyteller.
Yeah. You have.
Teach us the
way. How much time do you have? Yeah. One thing I'm really proud of, my political career is done. I don't want anything more to do with politics. But one thing I'm really proud of with our campaign is we never were negative at all. And one of the components of our campaign was telling the stories of people who lived inside the district. We actually talked about people inside the district more than I talked about myself. However, the quickest way to score points in politics is going negative. It's just true. And in a primary, there is no incentive to talk about unity or working together or team. A primary is basically like a very tribal election. And I'm not sure that I want to join any tribe other than the one I'm just happen to be in as an American. I don't know. I wish it wasn't the way that it is, but I don't really. I think one thing I really appreciate about your question is that I keep waiting for an American leader to arise who asks us to make sacrifices and asks us not to hate each other and asks us to work together and talks about the clear problems that we're all facing, whether it's the environment or education or our debt, even our debt. That feels like something we could definitely work on in a bipartisan way. Nobody wants to talk about the debt, or very few people want to talk about the debt. No one asks us to do anything. The only thing they ask of us is to dislike one another. And I hate it. And I don't know when it's going to change, but I keep waiting for somebody to engage in that sort of rhetoric, like a statesperson, really, is what I'm looking for. And I just don't feel like we have anyone right now. But I really appreciate your question. It's something if there was one good thing about my political run, it was that my son became energized in politics. And he was our secret weapon on the campaign trail. He's this beautiful 6'1", blonde, blue-eyed kid. And if I said, go knock on that door, there is no way anyone would close the door in his face. And so many 16-year-olds are looking at a phone constantly that they can't make eye contact and they can't talk to older people. They can't find a middle ground. He was spectacular. I actually kind of want to cry. I hope that he makes it. I hope that he actually continues with politics, because when I think about the future of my kids and what jobs are available to them, one thing that I don't think can be stolen by AI is politics. We're still going to need leaders. We're going to need people to work in their campaigns, right? And I think he could be a miraculous person like that. I believe in him. So, yeah.
Good for you, Dad.
Hi there.
Hi.
I really don't have any questions.
Okay.
I just felt the men in this room needed some representation. I also wanted to thank you for capturing the heart and soul of what it's like to live in a small town, especially in the state of Wisconsin. And if you've lived there like we have, come visit, because it is so much from the heart. It's hard to put into words, but you've done it. And I want to say thank you for that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I do have a question. But before I get there, I want to thank you for writing Hearts of Men.
Oh, thanks.
One of my all-time favorite books.
Oh, good.
And I've read all your books. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned music. Who are the authors that influenced you most?
I mean, it's so many, it's like an impossible question, but I mean, Steinbeck, Hemingway, Annie Proulx, Toni Morrison, Rick Bass, Anthony Bourdain, my old teacher at Iowa, James Allen McPherson. It goes on and on. I've been reading Lonesome Dove for the first time. Maybe like a lot of you, I read The Correspondent recently, and inside The Correspondent, she talks really nicely about Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove had been staring at me from my bookshelf for 25 years, like just glaring at me, and I was like, all right, I gotta read this thing. And it is, you wouldn't have to go get a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing if you just read that book very carefully. It is so freaking beautiful. So I think Larry McMurtry has kind of entered those ranks. I guess if I had been born and as a teenager I was 6'4" and 225, I would have, loved to have been a Milwaukee Brewer, a Green Bay Packer, but I'm not. And my next level of hero was writers. I just always loved writers and books, and so, yeah. I can't imagine my life without books. My wife is a book person. I mean, our whole house is filled with books.
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I'll be there in a second. Teach me good. Hi, thanks for coming. I really appreciated your book. This is not really a question, but there's a scene where Vivian is really ticked off at Charlie, and she's mad at him because she thinks that he doesn't like her apartment or where she lives, her house, because he can't stand it because in his mind, he's thinking, ugh, this is disgusting, and there's so much poverty or gross, and she says, we're happy here. We're okay. We don't need this. I'm wondering, sort of, have you had an experience like that where you're either on the one side, like I'm the Richie Rich side, or maybe not that, like you're stuck in a poverty side and you can see someone, I don't know how to explain that, but
I think I think I understand what you're saying. year before I got accepted to the Iowa Writers Workshop, my wife and I were living in Madison, Wisconsin. She was in her final year of law school. I was working at a liquor store. We were on Badger Care, which is like state health care. You know, the building that was right behind our house was like it was a porn shop. We were really close to bankruptcy and foreclosure. So I've been on the edge before. And I think one of the things that I remember about being on the edge is that poverty, for me, had a smell. You know, it smells like, for me, it smelled like mice. It smelled like, do you know when you cook hamburger inside a tightly enclosed environment, and especially if it's like very fatty hamburger, that smell just stays around. I like to write about characters that are middle class or lower middle class, and I just think you have to be honest about that. And I think those are smells that I connect to that. It's really important to me in my writing that when you enter one of my scenes as a reader, that you know how things, not just how things look, because that's the easy part, but like you know how things smell and how they sound.
I could smell the mice.
Yeah. So, and I think for him, part of the challenge in this relationship is, can they find room for each other after establishing these lives? You know, it's not like, is there room in Charlie's house or could he live in her house? They could make that happen, but you become entrenched in a way of living, you know, and that's part of their challenge. Did I answer your question?
You did. I could completely smell the mice.
Yeah.
The poverty smell, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That
Thank
was
you.
great.
Yeah, I
Totally
appreciate
in
it.
the scene. Thank you.
Thank you for writing such a beautiful story.
Oh, thanks.
It was gut-wrenching, beautiful, ugly, complex, this human story. My question is about the actual cover and sort of the choice to do the pink and the kind of sunset. I'd be curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the cover selection and kind of that process.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Yeah, so the cover was designed by the same woman who did Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Oh.
And it has a...
That was the book here 2 years ago,
Yeah.
3 years ago, yeah.
That sold a lot more copies than I did, but you can kind of see that there's like a little bit of a pastel, like, you know, the style is there. Look, I thank God I don't design my own covers, because it would have been like a misty night in Chippewa Falls, probably a black and white photo. No one would ever buy it. I like this cover. I find it very striking. It was a huge pain in my ass to paint all the edges of the book, but I got it done. No, I mean, I think part of the publisher's philosophy is just that those of us that are still buying hardcover books these days want to have something that becomes part of our collection that we hold on to. So they're spending more and more time with the design of the hardcover book and sprayed edges. One thing that was really cool that Source did is I really wanted them to, at the top of every chapter, there's sort of like a sundial. And I asked them to do that. I kind of wanted to like mark the progress of the book through some sort of design at the top of the chapter, and they obliged me on that. I like this cover a lot. I don't like the paperback nearly as much. And interestingly, the paperback was designed with help from AI, whereas this is a real person.
Did you consider any other cover, or was it like you saw it?
I think they gave me two options, which was this one and then what ultimately became the paperback. And I always like this one better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. So two of the hardest things, I think, about planning and hosting an event like this is the expectation and the nervousness that you have for how the event is going to go. So thank you both for delivering a beautiful conversation and exceeding our expectations tonight. Thank you so much for that. Heidi, thank you so much. The second thing that's hard about hosting is ending the event. It's hard to end a beautiful night like this, and I hope this night will live on in your memories and we can start to plan our next event for next year. So we're going to give Nick a minute and Heidi a minute, and if you purchase a book, if you can line up along the left-hand wall there, if you can get your number in queue, Nick will sign the book for you. So we'd like this to go as orderly as possible. So thank you all again so much for being here. You make it so special.